So far in this series, we have featured many different types of engines, rolling stock, and treasures. But as you wander around, there is one engine that is in the National Collection that you can't see, and it's an engine that nearly every single child has heard of through the books and the television series. With bright blue paintwork, a short stumpy funnel, and a short stumpy dome, I am talking about the infamous Thomas the Tank Engine. The stories of the plucky and cheeky tank engine and his friends were written by the late, great Reverend Wilbur Awdry. Born in 1911, Wilbur moved to a house called Journey's End when he was 9 years old. The house was only 200 yards next to one of the longest tunnels and one of the steepest gradeway gradients in the area. From his bed, Wilbur said he could hear the sounds of the engine as they tackled the gradient, as well as the barks from the banker engine that resided at the base of the hill, ready to give the larger engines a push. It didn't take much to imagine that the two engines were talking to each other in the chuffs and puffs as they worked, and through his observations, Wilbur could see distinct personalities emerging. It would be a further 25 years before Wilbur turned his memories into the famous stories. By then he was ordained, happily married, and had a young family. His son Christopher was ill with the measles, so to comfort him, the Reverend told Christopher of the three railway engines, Henry, Gordon, and Edward. He recounted how Gordon got stuck taking goods trains, and Edward, who was an old wise engine, helped him up the hill, and how Henry, who was worried how the rain would spoil his green paint, hid in a tunnel, and as punishment the fat director bricked him up. Wilbur added a flair of inspiration by giving the engines human-like faces, personalities, and the provision to speak. Christopher loved his father's stories, and Wilbur carved a model of Edward for Christopher to play with. He wanted to make a Gordon model, however the materials were scarce due to the war, so he settled on a smaller tank engine. This engine was painted with an NW on its side. There was no contest on the name, and little Thomas was born. Christopher loved Thomas and begged his father for more stories. In 1943, encouraged by his family, Wilbur submitted the first 3 stories to Edward Ward to publicise. Edward's Day Out, Edward and Gordon, and The Sad Story of Henry were not intended to be one volume, but the publishers insisted that a 4th story be added to the series. This was called Edward, Gordon and Henry, and was specifically designed to give Henry a happy ending and to release him from the tunnel. Wilbur wanted an air of realism in the stories, so while the engines were sentient, they still had the same advantages and disadvantages that real-life engines could experience. For example, breakdowns, slip-ups, and requiring drivers and firemen. He wanted this to be reflected in both the stories and the illustrations, and went through dozens of old railway magazines and many illustrators in order to get his vision. In all, Wilbur created 26 books. But when the 26th book was published, Wilbur felt the struggles of new ideas, and satisfied with his work, decided to put down the pen and retire. Or so he thought. In 1979, a young television producer called Britt Alcroft was working on a documentary on a heritage railway called the Bluebell. There, hidden in her research, she discovered the story of Stepney, a railway engine who was based at the Bluebell, who visited the Fat Controller's Railway in Wilbert's book. Fascinated, Britt continued to read more of the stories and was very impressed with the work. She approached Wilbur with a view to creating a television show. Wilbur at first was hesitant, and this was with good reason. 10 years prior to putting down the pen, the BBC approached the then editor of the books, Eric Marriott, with a view to making a live-action adaptation of the books. They used 00 gauge Hornby models, and on the 14th of June, the BBC broadcast the show live. It did not go well at all. The Henry model derailed, and the magic that the BBC and Awdry wanted to capture was marred by a human hand putting Henry back on the tracks. Wilbert was furious and called the show unprofessional and the points failure causing Henry to derail as an elementary mistake. The show was put on hold and eventually cancelled. The BBC did approach the publishers again, but they refused to grant them the rights, citing that they would rather focus on the stories. Brit convinced Wilbert that she could develop that connection on screen with the children Wilbert wanted to inspire. So seeing her enthusiasm, Audrey agreed to give her the television rights to the show. Brit wanted to be in control, so after raising funds by remortgaging her house, she created her own production company with the exclusive view of producing it. The series was produced with live-action models at the Clearwater in-house studio. They used radio-controlled models to make the engines and the eyes move, and static models for the people and animals. Stop motion was also employed to give the illusion of movement in the static models, and in one episode called Buzz Buzz, animation was layered over the film to show the fluid motion of a swarm of bees. One stipulation Brit had in the contract was that the stories must reflect the books. By then, Christopher had taken over his father's flair of writing and continued the series. This trend continued until Series 3, when some models were being adapted from magazine writer Andrew Bear, and some were original stories from Brit and her co-producer David Mitton. By Series 5, the show had stopped adapting the books and allowed for introductions of new characters. This opened up the scope and made the world of Thomas and his friends a whole lot bigger. In 1997, Wilbert passed away in his sleep. His son Christopher kept up the tradition of writing the Railway series until 2011. He fittingly ended the last book with "The End," something that none of the other books had ever ended with. The show, however, continues. In 2000, Thomas had his first theatrical release and an all-star cast. The film was a mix of live action and model animation that children adored. It also mixes the US version of the show, then called Shining Time, with the UK soda that the children were used to. 2000 also saw a change in production, with Brit changing the name of the production company to Ghislaine Entertainment, and the sale of the company to Hit Entertainment in 2002. Brit stepped down 2 years later, and the show went through several significant changes to keep up with competition, namely Bob the Builder. Series 12 took the biggest leap forward in the show with the introduction of partial CGI. The engines' faces were CGI'd and were superimposed on the real models. 2009, a new movie was created for Thomas called Hero of the Rails. Not only was this new film all now in CGI, but it was also the first time that each character had a definitive narrative and a separate voice. From Series 13 onwards, the show has retained this format. The show has never looked back from this point and has produced several movies, some great and some not so great. In 2018, the show was redesigned. Although we had characters that we knew and loved, it was felt to some that the female demographic was not well represented, and a new partnership with the United Nations gave the show the opportunity to develop. So, in season 22, we saw a shift in the sheds, with Edward moving out to be nearer his branch line, and Henry moving out to Vickerstown to be near his work. While this did not settle well with many of the original fans of the show, the two new characters, Rebecca and Nia, have been welcomed into the show by many children. The show also shifted narrators to Thomas, with Thomas giving the final message of the episode's moral in Vickerstown. With the subsequent movie, it expanded the railway beyond the island, and while it had a mixed review, it was good to see other engines and how other railways worked. At the moment, with the conclusion of season 24, there is some debate about where the Thomas franchise is going. While the books are fantastic, the show can be a little hit and miss. The first few series are timeless classics with Thomas and Gordon, Thomas and the Jet Engine, and Emily and the Special Coaches, but there were some more forgettable ones, especially as the show made the transition to CGI. Many original fans want the models and the realism back. This is understandable. But please don't hate me for saying this, the only reason I got back into Thomas and Friends was, in fact, watching bit from Big World, Big Adventures. I liked the pacing, the style, and I simply could not get that song from Steam Team to the Rescue out of my head for over a week. Maybe this reboot that Mattel are doing for season 25 may cause many new fans to see the series too. So what about the team? I can't help thinking we can't talk about this subject without talking about the engines themselves. With over 160 characters, I sadly can't cover them all, but we will cover some of the principal characters and some of the newer ones. Thomas's design is based on the LNER Class J50, but in the series and in the illustrations, they put him down as an LB and SCR E12 class prototype. He is featured in all the series, the specials and the films, and was brought to Sodor 2 years after he was created in 1915 to be a station pilot. Thomas longed to see the world beyond the big station, but he was too inexperienced to handle trains. After saving James following his derailment, Thomas was awarded 2 coaches and a branch line of his own. Thomas is very cheeky and playful, but he does take his job on the branch line very seriously. In the movie Big World, Big Adventures, Thomas had the opportunity to see the world following a conversation with a rally car, and this opened up the opportunity for him to work on other railways and see other cultures. Thomas was made an honorary member of the National Collection at the National Railway Museum after the Railway series books were preserved in the library. He loves teasing other engines and can be rather forgetful and impatient, but he's always kind-hearted and a good friend to engine, staff and passengers alike. Edward is a mixed traffic tender engine and is one of the first and oldest engines on the island. He worked on the Furness Railway and he was on loan, but due to the other railway calling him a shy steamer, they were happy to sell Edward to the North Western. Through the railway's careful maintenance and care, Edward has become a reliable and productive member of the team. He was the main protagonist in the first railway book after being locked away and the other engines rebuking him for being too old to work. The driver and fireman, taking pity on Edward, took him out to shunt trucks and play in the yard. Because of Edward's good work, the driver and fireman told him that he could take him out the next day. Edward is based on a modified Seagull K2 class built on the Furness Railway in 1896. In 1948, due to his hard work, he was awarded his own branch line running from Brendam Docks to the China Clay Pits. He also acts as a banker engine for the incline known as Gordon's Hill. Edward has had many adventures throughout the series, both on and off the branch line. He's a very kind-hearted and very keen to help any engine in need. He has insecurities, mostly with his age, and this is not helped by the bigger engines teasing him. But his hard-working attitude and mature demeanour has won many an engine over. Both in the stories and in the series, Edward is shown to be the engine the others go to for advice, and he is one of the few engines that can discipline unruly trucks and even engines such as Bill and Ben. Edward moved out of Tidmouth Sheds in the television series at the end of season 21, after temporarily moving into a shed with Philip at Wellsworth. Edward saw the attraction of being closer to his work, and considering his temperament and previous work ethic, in my opinion this felt like a natural move, and the writers who were concerned regarding Edward's further development did not want to give him repetitive storylines, and felt it was fitting that he was given a secondary role in the series. Henry is an interesting character in the Railway series, as this was the character that first caused conflict between Wilbert and his illustrators. According to Wilbert, Henry was created from stolen plans from Sir Nigel Gresley and is a hybrid of an A1 and a C1. Henry had problems from the start and was often ill and considered a poor steamer. In the series, Henry was given special Welsh coal to help him steam better. But in the stories, Henry was often confused with Gordon as their builds were similar, and there was inconsistencies with the wheel arrangement. Wilbert was frustrated at this, and purposely made him ill to write Henry out of the series. However, letters from concerned children changed his mind, so instead of writing him out, Henry had his derailment with the Flying Kipper, and he was sent to Crewe to be rebuilt as a Stanier Black 5. This solved both the firebox issue and the shape issue. In the TVs and the specials, Henry's special goal has been referenced to, even in his new shape. This has caused confusion among the fans until Henry himself set the record straight in one episode by stating that he hasn't used special coal for years. Since then, the subject of him using special coal has only been brought up as a reference, and no attention has ever been made for him using it. Henry is a kind engine, but a bit of a worrier. He loves the peace and quiet of the forest and is well suited to pulling goods work, as well as the express from time to time. He can have an arrogant and bossy tendencies, but these are few. In the later series, Henry's worrisome attitude deepens and he is often scared of minor things. In episode 1 of season 22, Henry announced that following Edward's move, he too would be leaving Tidmouth Sheds and move to Vickersdown to be closer to his work. This again was a writer's decision, as they did not want to repeat storylines that had already been exhausted. Henry has become a supporting character in the subsequent series and is often seen in the background. If you ask some children, some kids may not pick Gordon as their favourite character, but if you ask any adult, including myself, this grumpy engine ticks all the boxes. Gordon is by far one of the best characters in the series and in the books. He is an A1 Pacific prototype in the Northwest and purchased him from Sir Nigel Gresley at a knockdown price. We know by one of the stories that Gordon did spend some working life in London before he came to Sworder. Gordon is seen as an arrogant, proud and rather grumpy at times, but his behaviour does not affect his work ethic. He loves pulling the express across the island and takes this role seriously. He detests pulling trucks and views this as beneath his stature, but in later series Gordon appears to lessen his distaste on goods work and doesn't seem to mind taking them. He has been referred to as one of the most sensible engines on the island and has still held records for his express. Gordon's timeline in the television series does divert from the later books. In the later books, Gordon had to stop pulling the Nile Northwester due to the other railway's new timetable, as it was costing too much time for him to change engines at Barrow. In order to compete with the fast diesel engines and coinciding with British Rail banning steam on the line, the Fat Controller bought two Intercity 125 power cars called Pip and Emma to take the express. Gordon was surprisingly happy with this change, as he could now make 2 trips across the island with the local rather than 1, while Pip and Emma could travel to London. In the series, however, Sir Topham has made no indication of taking the express off Gordon. However, he has purchased Rebecca to help Gordon with the express in busy times. Considering the time frame and the previous episode where Gordon was quite vocal on his disgust about Henry and Edward moving out, it is possible that Gordon may have resented Rebecca's presence at first, but when she stood up for him, he accepts her friendship. I hope that Mattel, and in the next series to come, we see this friendship further develop. Gordon has been grumpy enough, and anyone can relate it would be nice to have a friend that we could confide in. All in all, Gordon is a great character. He's hard-working, good-hearted, and to all those adults in there, in my opinion, probably one of the most relatable characters in the whole show. After Thomas and Percy, James is one of the most popular engines when it comes to merchandise. He was designed and created in 1912 as an experimental Class 28 with an extra pony truck at the front and larger driving wheels. This was an attempt to cure the nosediving effect that affected other Class 28s when going at high speeds. This idea did not exactly work, and James was sold to the Northwestern following the grouping to the Big Four in 1923 and 24. James at first was painted black, a souvenir from his past working job, working at the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, and he sported wooden brake blocks. On his first day he derailed, following a run-in with the trucks, and his brakes caught fire. After he was rescued by Thomas and repaired, he was repainted red and got new brakes. James has had several temporary liveries, including B black and yellow, and even sporting a new pink undercoat. James is very unique within the team as he gets on equally with both the larger and the smaller engines, and is happy to work with both. He is very proud of his shining red paint and considers himself the most splendid engine on the island. But James is very prone to be very boastful and prideful and will look down on others, especially if the engines are smaller, dirty or old-fashioned. This has often backfired, and often he is scolded by the other engines. He is also considered to be the prankster of the team, telling jokes and using tricks in order to get himself out doing jobs he considers are beneath him. Our number 6 Percy is the smallest engine at Tidmouth, and Thomas's best friend. Percy owns the unique title as being the only engine on the railway series that we know of that Sir Topham Hatt personally named. He is the youngest engine and was brought to the island to fix a gap in the controller's shunting fleet after Thomas was given his branch line. Over time, as well as his shunting duties at the big station, Percy has earned the job of delivering the mail train, but will also lend a wheel on Thomas's branch line as a goods engine. Percy can be cheeky and funny as Thomas, and the two of them make quite a pair. He can be overconfident and naive at times, but he's also prone to letting his imagination overcloud his judgment, and is often portrayed as a scared little engine. Percy has also endured teasing from the larger engines, but he can hold his own and will stand up for himself. In the Railway series, Percy was created and solved a rift between Audrey and his illustrators. Wilbert was not impressed with Percy's design and begged the illustrator not to make Percy look like a green caterpillar with red stripes. This insulted the illustrator and he resigned from the book. It would take the Railway television series to make amends between the two when Thomas uses the same insult as Wilbert to insult Percy in the episode Woolly Bear. Percy is the first engine in the team that is not based on any specific design, but closely resembles a 040 Avonside saddle tank engine with some modifications, such as a larger bunker, and it was rumoured that he was probably started life as a 1340 Trojan, but was built and modified. This isn't unusual in railway history. It's very common to modify existing engines and then to reclass them into new engines. Nia was introduced to the show in the feature film Big World, Big Adventures. She originally lived in Kenya but was introduced when Thomas was travelling through to deliver wagons. She decided to accompany Thomas through his worldwide adventure and eventually settled on the island of Sodor after she confirmed that her shed was destroyed and she had no home anymore. Thomas took pity and offered her Nia a permanent home on the island. Nia jumped at the chance and has remained on the island ever since. Nia is based upon a KUR ED1 class made from Kenya and the Uganda Railway. They were reclassed EAR Class 11 for the East African Railway and was created between 1926 and 1930. The engines interestingly ran on a non-standard gauge, so Nia would have had to have been modified for Stephenson's gauge. Her number 18 was inspired due to her being introduced into the show in 2018. Her colour is orange with an African-style banding around her tanks. Nia is a very kind and well-respected engine and can stand up for herself. She adores animals and has a sweet and playful nature. In her native tongue of Swahili, her name means purpose. She does suffer from moments of self-doubt, however, but when she's proven to never give up and to find any solution possible. She's a very clever and problem solver and thinks nothing more but to how to be very useful. She's a wonderful addition to the railway, providing an outside culture, and I would love to see more of her teaching her traditions of her country to others. Emily was one of the first female engines to be introduced to the island and has been a long-term team member. She is a wise, caring engine, and although she was a little bossy in the beginning, she has become very sensible and safety-minded. In season 24, Emily was given the number 12 and has become the railway's safety engine. She is tasked to making sure Sodor is safe and free from hazards while getting help to other engines that are in trouble. Emily is based upon a Great Northern Railway Stirling G3 engine in terms of build and is now the oldest engine living in Tidmouth sheds. She is unique among her engines due to her two large driving wheels. The engines were withdrawn in 1916 and only one survives to this day. Emily is the only member on the island to sport emerald green livery with brass fittings. She is a caring and wise engine and a bit of a mother hen of sorts. I am pleased to see her get the recognition she deserved in season 24, as we definitely don't see enough of her. Rebecca is the newest engine to the steam team and moved into Tidmouth sheds to replace Henry, who moved to Vicarstown. Despite her large size, Rebecca is quite a shy engine and rather clumsy. She also doubts her self-worth, especially comparing herself to the other engine, and is insecure. She was introduced to the team to help Gordon with the express, and at first Gordon appeared to reject her help until after she stood for him against his brother. She has an uncanny knack of making others feel great and is happy to give plenty of compliments. While she may be considered gullible, Rebecca has proven several times she can stand up for herself and her friends. Rebecca is based upon a Battle of Britain class light Pacific and are often called bullies. Some of the engines were rebuilt by British Railways, however Rebecca is based upon the original shape with a cut-down tender. She is painted in NWR Sunshine Yellow with a red, orange and navy livery. Interestingly, Rebecca was supposed to be included in the film Big World Big Adventures with Nia. However, her part was cut due to the runtime. But her film short, called Meeting the Characters, still aired. The last member of the team, and yes, I do regard him as a team member, is Sir Topham Hatt. Depending on who you believe, Sir Topham is either the original director or is a name passed down from the generations of the Hatt family. I see Sir Topham as a father figure to the engines. He did originally have a strong hand, and some see that he was quite strict with the engine's punishments, but as the years have gone by, Sir Topham has shown he is firm but fair. Rather than giving out lessons to the engines and teaching them and only punishing them if the engines are known to be in the wrong. A good example of this is in the episode Forever and Ever. Sir Topham was fair to Henry and listened while he suggested the idea of him leaving the shed, and he also gave a fair explanation to Gordon about why Edward was staying out at Wellsworth, but he was also firm and strict on Gordon's behaviour. To be fair, the man has the patience of a saint, and I honestly love the scene where he pinches his nose. I can practically hear him say, "Give me strength." I do find that sometimes Sir Topham is used for comedic relief, and I don't feel this is fair to him. If Sir Topham was as goofy as some of the episodes make him to be, for a second he wouldn't even be considered for the head of the railway. He is a businessman at heart, and for the sake of all, has to make the railway work. This means he must have a level head, keen intellect, and be prepared for any challenge. I could go on and on and on about the show and the books. The books are simply fantastic, and I'm proud of the entire collection. Even though I don't have kids, I love reading the stories often, and the collection takes pride of place in my library, and it is also in the museum library where Thomas resides. But if you look carefully around the museum, you can find plenty of engines that have starred in both the books and the TV series. Engines such as Emily, Stephen, Stafford, Mallard, Flying Scotsman, Diesel, Spancam, and many more, as well as plenty of rolling stock to look at. There are also many references that many parents have even been able to create a checklist to see how many characters the children can spot. Hey, even at the ripe old age of 37, when I go to the museum, even I can't help it.